Good morning and good evening to everyone. I'm in a slightly different time zone, so slightly of a zombie. Not exactly. I'm, it's about 6 in the morning right now. So good to see everyone. My apologies for having to cancel class on Tuesday. At the very last minute, I had to fly off from the US. Everything is fine, everything's good. It's just very last minute decision and forgetting all the different things and different people I have to tell. So actually on Tuesday, when we were supposed to have class, I was in, in some airport somewhere, either about to land or about to take off or something like that. That morning I started to drive from my house at 3:30 or something like that. Anyway, everything's good. So here we are. I'm not able to show you what's outside. The power cord is not long enough to stream from outside. I'm in Costa Rica, by the way. So good morning, good evening, and Costa Rican coffee, yes. So that'll help the zombie part. Yeah, just summarize this translation. It's not at all Dharma. Just excuses. Yes, Jasper.
Guru, I think this is not post to Facebook.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, I'll find. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, but I believe it is, unless it got cut off.
Directed to myself.
No, it is. So, before I forget, this later today, there's a special program with the Dragon Kagyu group in Cusco, Peru. They're celebrating the 6th anniversary of the completion of the stupa that His Holiness had built in Cusco, Peru. So if somebody can share the information in our chat room, that would be great. The Zoom information. The topic is, of course, it's a celebration of the stupa, but on this occasion I want to give a short teaching on the practice of metta. As many of you know, the practice of metta, practice of cultivating loving kindness as a state of being, as a state of mind. Then particularly our translation team, the Drigum Dhammakirti translation team, is in the midst of translating a text by Kyoba Rinpoche, a text that records the teachings of Kyoba Rinpoche on how to practice metta meditation. Very special text. Again, as far as we know in the Tibetan material, there isn't that much information on these kinds of practices. Tibetans very quickly decided, Vajrayana is best, Vajrayana is best. Then they took off, with millions and millions, no exaggeration, of Vajrayana sadhana of this type, of that type, of this type, of that type. But here, what we have is a very beautiful set of instructions that Kyopa Rinpoche gave on how to practice metta, how to cultivate metta in a step-by-step way. So this will happen. Our class will end New York time at 10, and then the Peru celebration teaching will start at noon. So meaning 2 hours after we end this class, that class will start wherever you are. Since it will be very, very late in Asia, midnight, so unfortunately then we will not have Chinese translation for this program, but we will have the Spanish translation. Then, since I'm in Costa Rica, just to plant a seed, some of you might know that we did a short retreat here back in February on this set of teachings called the Great Drigong Teachings to the Assembly. So this is a set of teachings that Kyopa Jigten Songkran gave. From the evidence of the collection, you could tell that he gave over a period of 30 days. Every day he gave one teaching. So we covered 6, I believe, the last time. So I anticipate that the next set will happen also around February, probably also in Costa Rica. That set of retreat, we are not live streaming, but we have recorded. So if there are people who came to the first one, obviously, if you want to come to the second one, you're welcome. If you did not come to the first one and you want to come to the second one, then at the very least, you should listen to all the recordings from the first one. Then even the people who are coming to the second one, I think you should start listening to the recordings from the first one. Dala Dhawa Jepe Dra Nopar Jepe Gek Tarpada Tham Je Kembe Bardu Jobra Jepa Tham Je Gesu Jepe Manam Kada Nampe Senjen Tham Je Deva Tham Den Dunya Tham Dirne Dulana Meba Yang Dabra Sobe Chanchu Rinpoche Tobar Jan Dala Dhamba Jepe Dra Nopar Jepe Gek Tarpada Tham Je Kempe Bardu Jobra Jepa Tham Je Gesu Jepe Manam Kada Nampe Senjen Tham Je Dewa Tham Den Dunya Tham Dirne Dulana Meba Yang Dabra Sobe Chanchu Rinpoche Tobar Jan Dala Dhamba Jepe Dra No bara jepe ge tarpadan tam je kembe bardu jobra jeba tam je giz jebe manam kada nampe senjen tam je dewa tam den dunya tam de nirdu lana mebaya dabara sobe chanchu rinpoche dobra je dala dhamma jebe dra Nobara Jepe Gek Tarpadan Tam Je Gembe Baridu Chopra Jeba Tam Je Giso Jepe Manam Kadang Nampe Senjen Tam Je Dewa Tam Ten Tungal Thunder Nirdu Lana Mebaya Dabra Zobe Janju Rinpoche Dobra Jade Jedu Sama Yeki Bardu Lunga Yisum Gewala Ko Mashe Bardu Lunga Yisum Gewala Ko Du Terene Sunde Ne Mansanta Sanki Bardu Lunga Yisum Gewala Ko Sanje Chodan Sugi Chonamla Chanchu Bardu Dane Gebzu Je Dagi Jinsu Gebe Sonam Kin Chola Benji Sanje Drobrasho Sanje Chodan Sugi Chonamla Chanchu Bardu Dane Gebzu Je Dagi Jinsu Gebe Sonam Kin Chola Benji Sanje Drobrasho Sanje Chodan Sugi Chonamla Chanchu Bardu Dane Gebzu Je Dagi Jinsu Gebe Sonam Kin Chola Benji Sanje Drobrasho Mahonam Kadang Nyampe Senjen Tamche Dewa Dan Dewen Kendan Dembren Gyuji Dunya Dang Dunya Gi Kyudan Dewa Gyuji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dang Me Dewa Gyuji Niring Chadang Nidang Dewa Danyong Lana Bran Gyuji Mahonam Kadang Nyampe Senjen Tamche Dewa Dan Dewen Kendan Dembren Gyuji Dunya Dang Dunya Gi Kyudan Dewa Gyuji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dang Me Dewa Gyuji Niring Chadang Nidang Dewa Danyong la nepar gyurje manang kadang nyampe senjen tamje dewa da dewen gendan tempar gyurje dunya dang dunya gi gyudan dewa gyurje dunya mepe dewa dang me dewa gyurje nering chadang nidang dewa danyong la nepar gyurje manang kadang nyampe senjen tamje dewa dang dewen gendan tempar gyurje dunya dang dunya gi Gyudan Dewa Gyuji Dunya Mepe Dewa Dame Dewa Gyuji Niring Chadang Nidang Dewa Danyong La Nepra Gyuji. In all the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you lions among humans I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to noble deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. With as many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom are Buddhas, numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you conquerors in this way, with infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse. I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors and praise all of you God to bliss. With the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps, and superior incense, I offer to you, conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances and sandalwood powder, heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged, I offer to you, conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you, conquerors with the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors all the harmful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds of all conquerors in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are lamps of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. All you who are my protectors, please turn the unexcelled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana. Please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world for their happiness and well-being. Wandering beings, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain, 4 continents, sun and moon, I visualize as the Buddha land and offer it. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. To the Gurus who possess the 3 kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings. With my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence, please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it all to complete awakening. Om Guru Deva Dhaki Nirana Mandala Pratitya Soham. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. Duji chanten tili naroda mamita popa duji dingun kanten sunten sawe la me shab sa ju la ma yidam chokyong la suwa dep su dak yu jin ju lo kyab dengi dom me som dengi drape dong sung yong la kyang som me kya wan duji chang pa ji dingun pa shab la du du ta tu sang kyo kyo le me jin jin lo shi tu je jin dengi ma pa sa ne kya sem chu de du du pra jin ji lo 장성 변마 계사 동벌라 야sen jo kenga dumnya pema june she she da go do kan do mambo gorge ge de se da do ge je lo je she so so go do pema se de hong ngo min jo ge ye ge bo da ne do so san je kun ge ngo won ni ran sen jo kun ngo sun don ze ba zo be da me sha ba so wa So I do not have my physical Bodhicharyavatara book with me. So I believe we were somewhere around stanza 86. Is that where we stopped last time? Somewhere around there? So we are now in the section, as I'm sure you remember, where Shantideva is using a category known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Usually that's how it's translated into English, based on Theravada sources. Is called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Based on Tibetan sources, interpretation, if you translate from Tibetan, Often it's called the four close placements. I think we're not familiar with this expression. Close placements. And this translation of close placements is referring to how we should kind of close, like close, how we should place our mind, our attention closely, near, close in that sense, near placements. Sometimes it's also translated as that. But basically, either of the translations, what we're talking about generally is these four areas, four windows, you could say, that you can look into to gain a clearer understanding of what is this? What is this? So, in Pali, these are the Satipatthana, the four Satipatthanas. Generally, with regards to these four windows, if we could look at it that way, four windows to kind of look into what is this. There are differences in opinion, and I think these differences in opinion is because if you actually follow, all the different places where the Buddha used either one of these four windows or all four windows to help his disciples to see more clearly what is this. Essentially, it's saying, who am I? Who am I? It's answering that question. What am I? Who am I? Right? And there's a number of different positions with regards to how we make use of these four windows to look. One school of thought will say these four windows, all four of them are absolutely necessary. In that by looking in from the first window, you only see this level of reality, which while is better than looking through other windows, is not yet the most profound. Then you need to look, after you are able to see clearly through the first window, then you should look through the second window, the third window, the fourth window, that it will become more and more clear, more and more profound. So you have to look through the four windows. There's another school of thought, which is that any of these windows you can look into, and it can do the full work of any of the other. If you look at only one window, if you look hard enough, if you look long enough, you will arrive at the same realization, the same view as from the fourth window. So the second view says, it's not necessary that you have to go through all 4 stages. So then these 4, again, a quick reminder, is like the window of body, the window of sensation, feelings, Vedana, Kaya, Vedana, then the window of mind, and then the window of phenomena. From last week we talked about, just to refresh, like certainly yes, these 4 windows could be used to view or to consider other people. Primarily the Buddha gave these 4 windows of viewing, to view at this, not over there, to view at this primarily. And particularly like in Shantideva's case, he's going to also emphasize, like you use these 4 windows to look into who am I? And more to the point, the I that we so instinctively, the I that we so so habitually assume to be there, assume to be the reason for our existence, assume to be the most important thing, assume to be what we need to pamper, what we need to protect. This I, if we look through these 4 windows, we will see that there is no good reason to operate with such a strong feeling, such a strong conviction that this I truly exists. So in particular, then Shantideva is using these four windows, right, to have us see more clearly how the self that we habitually think and behave, the self that we habitually think to exist, cannot exist the way we think it exists. The self that we habitually think, feel, exist cannot exist the way we think it exists, the way we assume it exists. So this is what we mean by selflessness, sometimes translated in English as identitylessness, or simply I-less, selflessness. So here, right, selflessness don't mean absolutely no self. I think this is crucial to understand. It doesn't mean like absolutely no self. But what it does mean is the self that we habitually, instinctively think, feel, exist, cannot exist in that way. In the way that we think we feel it exists. Which is what way? Which is exists in a way that is permanent, unchanging, and self-powered, without relying on conditions, self-powered, always there. So singular, self-powered, independent, not interdependent, abiding, unchanging, and not changing all the time. That kind of self is impossible. This is what Shantideva wants us to see through these four windows. Yeah, so in this case, it's Shantideva using these four windows to lead us to this understanding, to this insight. Now, elsewhere, these four windows have been used variously. Again, Buddha often used these four windows, so to say. Often would lead his disciples to one or all four of these windows to look more clearly, to look more closely, right? The close placement, near placement. So come closer, come nearer, so that you can see more clearly. So elsewhere, the Buddha also took, just to point out, so that you can see more uses of these four windows, these four satipatthana. Elsewhere, with regard to the first window, the Buddha emphasized how the undesirable nature of the obsession and entanglements with the body. So it's often called the quality of unclean, asubha, in Sanskrit Pali. In Pali, asubha, unclean, the unclean nature. And the point is the absurdity, the silliness of being so entangled and obsessed with this body as desirable. Then the second window, the window of sensations, the window of feelings. And remember, right, this feeling and sensation, we're not talking about the way we use the word feelings, but it's basically, you could say, it's a precognitive mental event, meaning before you even know what your eyes are really seeing, what your nose is really smelling, what your tongue is really tasting. An earlier moment than even recognizing, oh, that is, I don't know, pizza, or, that is, mountain. Before even that, according to the Buddha's, you could say, Buddha discussing how perception takes place, how grasping turns up. He says, in this precognitive moment, you have an immediate response to things that basically, when you look at that response, you can categorize the responses into like, dislike, neutral, or don't care. I said like, dislike, or neutral. Neutral, basically don't care. Either way. So those are the feelings we're talking about. Those are the sensations. So with regards to this second window, Buddha, in other places, not in our Shantideva text, will point to the suffering nature or the burdensome nature of constantly being dragged around by this feeling of, I like this, I don't like this, and I don't care. I like this, I don't like this, don't care. This don't care has a shadow of downness and imprecision to it. It's not like equanimity, which is a good quality to cultivate. This is more like, I don't care. Right? So Buddha, through the second window, wants to show us, like, even when we are liking something, like our response is like, want. From there, once you like, want, stress begins, right? Because you want to get more, or what you got, you're afraid of losing. So no need to explain, the one that you don't want, how stress comes, stress, which is dukkha. So that's the second window, and it's pointing to another characteristic of confused existence. The first one is unclean. Second one is dukkha, or suffering. Then the third window, right, the window of looking at all the mental, emotional moments and activity that is taking place. When we look at this and say, what is this? You can see the momentary nature of moment after moment, one emotion, one thought, this emotion, back to back to back to back to back, this constant flow of mental, emotional. So this is when, from the level of feelings, it now branches out to this, that, right? Now it's cognitive, then emotional responses, all sorts of complicated responses to whatever we come in contact with. This is the third window, the window of mind. Here then, the quality often that the Buddha brings to this is to say, by looking at this, see how unreliable this is. Meaning then, this is what we often translate as impermanence. But the real issue with impermanence is unreliable, uncertain, not sure. So can we see the uncertain, unsure nature of our existence? We're not even talking about impermanence like unsure. Of course, elsewhere the Buddha talks about this. You're not sure, whether tomorrow will come first or next life will come first. Of course, we all operate like, of course tomorrow is going to come first, next life will come later. But how many people, who lost their life yesterday, day before yesterday, thought, next life will come before tomorrow, right? So elsewhere, Buddha talks about this kind of unsure impermanence. But here, even in a more subtle way, this impermanence of mind is to be able to see how, every moment, the next moment is unsure, uncertain. So like for meditators, for example, you part of it actually, we think, meditation makes everything sure. Sometimes we practice meditation with this hope. By meditating, everything will be more sure. Everything will be more secure. Everything will be more stable. But ironically, the real power of, at least the way the Buddha wants us to use meditation, is to see fully the unsure, uncertain, unstable, unreliable nature of our moment-to-moment thoughts, feelings, perception. You can also state it as, don't believe. Don't believe. Don't believe, like, don't naively, don't habitually believe everything you think of, everything you feel. Have like a moment of like, wait, is it? Unsure. So Buddha wants us to see the uncertain nature of these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, instead of latching on so tightly and say, I feel really angry right now. I feel really in love right now. I feel really, whatever it is. Buddha says, have you seen clearly the uncertain nature of all these feelings? Then the fourth window, right? The window on phenomena. Now we're looking at the basic building blocks of all experiences. Not just experience, but even the material basis of the arising of these experiences, to be able to see down to their elemental level. That in a way you could say that all that there is just a vibration, so to say, like these atoms, right, rubbing against each other. If we look at one aspect of phenomena is really what in modern scientific we would call like atoms, and then the structure of the atom, like the quarks, right? All these smaller and smaller parts, they are just rubbing against each other, right? To be able to see the dharmas, the phenomena, as and there, it's the not self, often. How all of that cannot be a basis for any kind of self. Like how can you, seeing the vibrational nature or the composite nature of all things, where is any self to be found? So often the not self part is seen through the window, the fourth window. But here again, Shantideva uses all four windows to point to have us see. It cannot be self. Self cannot be in this way. More limited senses of self, yes, of course, that exist. The self that experiences suffering and decides, I don't want this suffering again and again and again and again. I don't want to continue this dream. I want this dream to end. That self, of course, exists. And if you don't see that self exist, or if you pretend that self doesn't exist, then you'll be in this dream forever. So earlier, Shantideva, we already covered there. One of the objections is like saying, if you say that, no self exists, then what's the point? Why even bother? Who is even suffering? And then why bother having any compassion for anyone? Nothing exists in any case. No. Shantideva says, those types of self, even though not ultimately existing, but exist enough and long enough to make things miserable for this dream. Antonio is offline because his internet is out, and he's using the phone. So, well, we will continue. So those briefly, those are the four windows, yeah, and how in each of the window one characteristic is emphasized. But here, Shantideva is emphasizing the not self. So selflessness or not self, right, is like is, you can say, it's that vocabulary is interchangeable with emptiness. Mahayana sources tend to use the word emptiness, shunyata. That this is shunya, this is shunya, this is empty, this is empty, this is empty. In pre-Mahayana sources, usually not self, not self, not self. So anatta or anatman or nairatma, nairatmya, not I, not self. All these words are basically, you could say, interchangeable. Welcome back, Antonio. What did you hear when you came in? I'm in the Spanish room, so you can go there and speak there. I cannot hear you even though I'm in the Spanish room. I'm in a Spanish channel. You are muted. Oh, you need to be reassigned. Okay. Hold on. Let me reassign you. Okay, I think you are now the interpreter. Can you check and see? Okay, I can. So what did you hear when you came in? Yeah. Of what? So what did you hear? Ah, okay. Okay. Oh, so you didn't hear the rest of the four windows, the fourth window? No. Okay. Right. Okay. So briefly, in the fourth window, the Buddha is normally under the fourth window of phenomena. Buddha is then having a see the not self nature, how self cannot be this one thing, because what we call self is really an aggregate of all these shifting, changing, discrete kind of moments, right? Kind of strung together. So the fourth window, generally Buddha often, when he says look into the fourth window, is to see selflessness. Now, for Shantideva, he's using all four windows to point to this selflessness. Then I said, for selflessness, it's basically, for all intents and purposes, it's interchangeable with this word emptiness, shunyata. So using shunyata, this word, or shunya, this is empty, this is empty, this is empty, is a characteristic usually of Mahayana texts. In pre-Mahayana, more often you will find the expression of not self or selfless, lack of self. So anatman or nairatmya. This is not self, this is not self, this is not self. But for all intents and purposes, they're interchangeable. So now, if we look at 86, Shantideva says. So 85, right? He says, let's just look at hand. What we call hand, actually, is a group of fingers. So hand is just a term that we came up with to group this together. We call hand. But actually he says hand is just a group of fingers. Then he says like even finger, when you say, oh, finger, well, it's just 3 joints. So then, and it says these joints, and then it says even the word joint. There are many parts. So then 86, it says these parts, so I'm reading 86, these parts themselves will break down into particles. Particles will be maybe what we call atoms, right? And these atoms further divide into direction. What he's saying is that, right? So when you have 2 atoms, right, touching each other, 2 particles, right? Then now that particle, which you might think is whole, complete, no more parts to it, he says, of course there's part to it, because this part of this particle is touching this part of this particle. This part over here of this particle is touching this part. So now the particles have directions. And when they have directions, then it's not whole, according to what he's pointing out. Then he says, these fragments too lack partless parts, because then you say, oh, right side, left side, upside, downside, right? Then when you look at the upside, oh, actually the upside consists of many parts that come together to form the upside. The downside, many smaller parts came together to form the downside. Then he says you cannot find any partless parts. In the end, they are like space. So even these particles, even these atoms, don't truly exist. Of course, then in quantum physics, you go down to the level of, is it a wave? Is it a particle? Then, surprisingly, interestingly, I guess for the Chittamatra people, it says, well, depend on the mind that is perceiving it. Then it becomes a wave or a particle. In some ways, I think the Chittamatra people will say, aha, you Madhyamaka people who have been criticizing us, there's something about the mind, you know. This line, you know, these fragments too lack partless parts. They are like space. And this one is really important because space, you know, as a metaphor, as an example, as an analogy for the nature of mind, is often, this connection is often made. So here, through this kind of analysis, when you break down form, body, form, into the parts, into the parts, into the parts, into the parts, and you keep going and keep going and keep going until you arrive at space. So here I think maybe I should clarify, you know, I don't believe that it's the case that there's a fixed number of layers that you have to go before we all discover this space or arrive at this space-like nature. So it's not the case that, you know, there are absolutely 79 levels. Then we all have to go through 79 levels, then we will find space, right? If that was the case, then you could say, that must be real. But that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is you need to go as far as you need to go. Meaning, as long as there is still grasping, then not far enough. So in a way, this analysis is to exhaust the grasping mind. So whenever the grasping mind arrives at, they are like space, then you have gone far enough. But if on the basis of, oh, they are like space, and now you make space, right, an object of grasping, oh, then not far enough. You have to go further. Then again, so to say that it's space-like, it's not saying that space becomes an object. It's in fact, you arrive at an objectless state where the mind just rests. That is when you have gone far enough. That is when you experience the non-existence of any particle, anything left for grasping, to serve as a hook for grasping. No more hooks. All hooks are gone. Then 87. All form, all bodies, all forms, all materiality And therefore, it's like a dream. Like a dream in that, in dreams, experiences are real, real enough at least. It can evoke fear, it can evoke desire, it can evoke boredom, it can, all those things turn up in a dream. But beyond, those emotional responses that are produced, there's no objectively real things going on. So see that all forms, all materiality is like a dream. So given that, the next line, and so who will be attached to it? So who is this I that is, if that is attached to this dream? And in fact, even one step further, in the next part of the second line, who is investigating? So not only, right, do you arrive at this space-like experience, but even there, if in case, while having this space-like experience, there's a sense of I'm experiencing, then you even have to look at that. What is that I? Who is this investigating? Who is this that is investigating into the 79 levels or 12 levels? Maybe your grasping is not so strong. 12 levels is enough. Grasping is very strong, you have to go 79, right? But even that, you have to say, but who is this who is doing the investigation? Even that, you have to see how it's not real. It doesn't stand alone. So both the investigator, or the one doing the analysis, and what is analyzed, which in this case is body, is form, both, they are interdependent, and therefore they're interdependent, therefore they don't have independent existence. Both subject, object lack independent existence. The body in this way has no existence. What therefore, this next part, what therefore is male and what is female? This is very interesting, Shantideva raising this question at the end, but I'll elaborate after the translation. So here, the last two lines of 87. The immediate kind of context of this is, of course, there Shantideva is basically saying to his fellow monks, he's addressing the kind of natural attraction between men and women. So he's saying, where's the basis of that attraction? When in fact, this category of men and women, they're not ultimately real. So that's the immediate reference. But of course, this point, can also be extended to some of other implications to that, which is, you could say, all the kind of gender roles, that our culture, our society has assigned to, if your body has, these physical parts, then you naturally, you should do this. If your body has these other parts, naturally, you should do that kind of work. So these lines here in Shantideva is calling into question all these kind of rigid ways of thinking. Men should be like this, like this, like this. Women should be like this, like this, like this. So these two lines here, just kind of does away. And even like, right now, all these kind of people not being able to, not get freaked out by, how someone who looks like a woman, maybe it's not a woman. Someone who looks like a man, maybe it's not a man, or don't identify as a man. Like some people get very uncomfortable with that. Shantideva here says, come on. This is all based on our mind fixating on this and that. So with 87, the category, the window of body is complete. So with 88, he begins the second window, the window of sensations, feelings, which is again, remember, it's a pre-cognitive, before you even recognize what you are seeing, what you are tasting, what you are touching, in that first instant of contact. So basically, briefly, in Buddhist psychology, we say for an experience, for a moment of experience to take place, first you need to have a particular consciousness has to be present that is related to what is being perceived. So like we talk about eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness. These are all moments of consciousness. So consciousness associated with I. So a moment, that moment of I consciousness has to be present. Then there has to be a physical I that is functional. And then there is a object of sight has to be present. When these three things are present, when they come together, then a sight perception has taken place. Right? Now, so this is the moment of contact. So when this contact happens, right, it's said that even before you recognize what is or what isn't, you have a, you could say, response, an emotional response, very, very subtle, very, very subtle, but already there's a response of like, don't like, or neutral, don't care. So if you want to explain further, well, how did this come about? You know, does everybody has the same response to things? Absolutely not. So where does this come from? Where does this like precognitive response come from? Comes from karmic imprints. Comes from karmic imprints, past lives. So some people, you know, instinctively, without even registering yet, will not like spicy, or like spicy, or will not like men, will like women, or will not like hot, will like cold, even without recognizing yet, in that moment of contact, this Vedana, this feeling, this sensation already happens. So this is the second window. Now, Shantideva again wants us to look into the second window, but instead of focusing on, like earlier I said, elsewhere the Buddha would focus on, see the suffering nature, the dukkha nature of all three types of sensations. Here, again, Shantideva uses this window to show us selflessness, lack of self, emptiness. Of course, to point out, right, these three responses of like, and don't care, right, or neutral, they can be traced to what's known as the three poisons. So the three poisons are confusion, attachment, and aversion. So confusion is a blurry state of mind. The most basic kind of aspect of confusion is unknowing. Then there's an active aspect of confusion, which is the word confusion, like you actively misinterpret, misperceive. But underneath that is the not knowing. So that gives rise to don't care, neutral. Not the good equanimity. So there are two types, They seem very similar, neutral. But this neutral is the without knowledge kind of neutral. The equanimity that we should cultivate, that is based on seeing the kind of the same nature of all phenomena. So then we don't react, we don't act. That kind of equanimity. But anyway, then attachment and aversion, right, is the like and don't like. So these three responses is the three poisons in their most basic kind of ground level. From there, it develops into more complex, more complicated, and more complicated, and more complicated, and more fancy, and more fancy. So today I'm not going to start this section, but just to briefly say what's going to happen is Shantideva will say, so with regards to these feelings, he says, if this liking or don't liking is truly real, then, how come, it changes so quickly? So he's taking us into a more subtle way of experiencing and therefore understanding our this precognitive response to things, liking and disliking. So again, just a reminder, if you want to join us for the later teaching for today, please take note of the information. Once we close the Zoom room, then it will be gone. And so we'll do our dedication now. Changju Sem Chorim Poche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge 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 Ba Nam Pa Me Pa Ya Go Ne Gong Du Pe War Sho. One final thing is I have a retreat coming up in North Carolina in early August at this retreat center called Southern Dharma Retreat Center. So Southern Dharma Retreat Center, if you look up that website, you will find more information. Once a year I teach at this retreat center, and this time it will be on what's known as the Shravasti meditation. And so just take a look if you have time, if you have interest, if you can come to that retreat. I don't know if there's any more space left. I have no idea. Just calling your attention. Maybe no need to translate this one. The retreat will only be in English. Okay, bye-bye.
Gracias, Dr. Lai. Bye.
Thanks, Dr. Lai.
Thank you.
Ta-ta, bye-bye.
You, Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.